All right, so we are recording now, and this is a talk specifically on the holidays, particularly this period of time that's coming up, the fourth quarter, how to make sure that your profits are maintained, and a big part of that is actually staying in stock. So we'll be talking about the IPI limitations, the restock limitations, during the holidays, what you should have in place, what you should be thinking of right now and executing and getting into place, as well as some tips regarding the algorithm, the restock algorithm, and how you can, when you understand it, you can make sure that you are setting up your systems to be able to benefit from it, or at least not get as I guess, hit by it, because there is a lot going on right now in Amazon with people having trouble with restocking. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do a quick screen share. All right, so hopefully you can see the screen. Let me know if you cannot. And then again, if you have any questions as we go along, go ahead and type them in the chat. All right, so we're talking about surviving IPI limitations during the holidays. It's fourth quarter coming up. A little bit about me, in case you don't know who I am. My name is Chelsea Cohen. I'm an Amazon seller, speaker, and consultant. And I have been a copywriting expert. I have a copywriting agency, have been working with Amazon sellers to increase their conversion rates, and I've been featured on AMPM podcast, Seller Stories with Jungle Scout, and the Amazing Summit, among others. So the reason why I got into software and into inventory management was really to handle a problem in my own business. And one of the things I wanted to mention, right off the bat is if you stay to the end, I've got I'm going to be sending out a list of warehouses and fulfillment centers. If that's something that you're interested in, we'll be getting into that quite a bit today. So basically, my struggle is that I noticed that I was having trouble in inventory management, and it was one of the things that was crippling my cash flow. It was hurting my profit, and I felt like if I didn't solve that problem, I was going to have some difficulties in my business. So some examples are stocking out for a whole month and losing a month's worth of income in my top seller. One time, one of the first Christmases that we had, we lost about $30,000 in sales due to inventory being stranded at Amazon. It wasn't checked in correctly, and it got lost, and then it got found after Christmas. So that put a big damper on our inventory sales early on in our business. Another one was over ordering a new product and paying thousands in extra storage fees and interest in loan interest due to some miscalculations, and just overestimating holiday inventory and the fees that go along with that. So comment in the chat if this sounds familiar to you, if this is something that you have experienced. I think this is probably one of the more common things to occur in the Amazon seller space. Stocking out and over ordering and getting the balance right is sometimes challenging. So I knew that I needed a solution, and I had been looking for a solution. But I just really couldn't find anything that was working for me. I asked people in my masterminds, and they felt the same way, that they weren't really finding anything that worked the way that they thought it should, or that they needed it to work. So I found that was essentially something that was a big opportunity to solve a problem that I thought, I've got, I know how it needs to work, and maybe I just need to find someone who can help me to put it together. So about 2 weeks after deciding that I was going to take this on, I met this guy. So this is Dan Fernandez. He's the founder of Thomason.com, and it's an influencer brand connector. And I had heard of them in 2015. They had been in the Amazon space before the terms of service changes for reviews. So they were taking on a lot of customers who were Amazon sellers and wanted video reviews. So they'd have these bloggers who would do the video reviews, put them up on Amazon, and after the review purge, they were no longer able to do that. So I was very interested in the fact that he had managed to pivot his business. And so, we essentially kind of teamed up together on this project called So Stocked. And so we've spent the last 2 years basically eating, sleeping, and breathing Amazon inventory. And we've tested a lot of the other inventory softwares, seen some of the holes in the market, seen some of the holes in the systems. And then we've worked with and talked to dozens, well, at this point, no, hundreds, I can update that. At this point, hundreds of 7 and 8 figure Amazon businesses. So we've crowdsourced a lot of information and gotten a real great understanding of how an inventory management software needs to work and all of the facets and all of the tools and the bells and whistles that go along with really doing and getting an inventory management software right for these more, I guess, more advanced, meaning that you don't have just one product or you really just you're having a hard time keeping in stock. What are the actual things that are needed and why are people making so many mistakes with inventory? So we're really going to talk about fourth quarter today. We're going to talk a lot about fourth quarter and how to stay in stock during fourth quarter, because if your profits are going to, if you're going to increase your profits this year, it's going to be by capitalizing on fourth quarter. So Amazon dropped a bomb in July, and essentially everyone became familiar with something called IPI, right? If you haven't heard of it, you probably have just started hearing about it. If you don't know what it is, we're going to talk a little bit about it and what it is and how to affect it. So IPI stands for Inventory Performance Index, and essentially it's a grading system of how good you are at inventory management. And Amazon's just looking at the inventory that you send into Amazon. So they have a grading system, and earlier this year they said that everyone who had a score of 350 was going to have some restrictions, some storage restrictions. Then they lowered it to 400, which surprised and worried a lot of people. And then on July 13th, they announced that that was going to be 500. So the score, the minimum threshold for these storage limits was 500. So anyone with a score less than 500 was going to be subject to storage volume limits. And we'll talk about what makes up that score. But the interesting thing is, the second bomb really is that even if your score is not under 500, Amazon is clamping down on pretty much everyone's limits, right? It seems to be more than ever this year that they're really clamping down on storage limits a lot. And I think it's because everything's been shifting online, so they're just kind of inundated with all of this online inventory, and they're really getting tired of being a storage warehouse. They want to have products moving through their warehouse consistently, because if it's sitting there, it's actually costing them money, it's taking up space, and it's not valuable. They're not in the business of being a storage facility, they're in the business of being a distributor. So that's what they're trying to get towards. So they're penalizing a lot of sellers, and they're throwing a wrench in a lot of sellers' plans. And so we're gonna, go over what is actually happening and why, what are the things that we can do to kind of work with Amazon. All right, I've got a question here. I have over 700 and they're still setting 200 units or less on a super seller, and then we can slowly increase. Yeah, so usually 200 units is the limit for any product that has very low velocity or is a brand new product. But we'll talk about how that can be gradually increased and also go over kind of where you can find these numbers. All right, so what does this mean for everyone? So it means that until the end of the year, until December 31st, there's going to be a restriction on the amount of inventory that Amazon's letting you send in. But also, like I said, all sellers are seeing limits, and I wouldn't guarantee that Amazon is going to loosen up on the restrictions after December. They might, to some degree, but I would not think that once they've gotten us to get out of their warehouses, they're not going to be super excited to bring us back in and kind of start the whole thing over again. So they might loosen up a little bit, but we need to start having plans as Amazon sellers to not rely only on Amazon for these things. All right, so what is an IPI score? So like I said, IPI stands for Inventory Performance Index, and it's how Amazon calculates how good you are at maintaining acceptable levels of inventory. So there are a couple of numbers associated with an IPI limit, or really with a restocking limit. If you don't have an IPI restriction, you will still have restocking restrictions. So an IPI limit, there's IPI limit and then there's max ship quantity. So the IPI limit is the total amount of inventory that Amazon is allowing you to have at FBA at any one time. They also give you space limits. So they give you space limits and they give you per SKU limits. So that can get into some difficulty, which we'll talk about in a minute. There is something called max ship quantity. So max ship quantity is essentially your limit, your total limit minus your current FBA inventory and any incoming FBA shipments. So I'll kind of give you an idea of what that is. I'm going to go ahead and show you in SoStocked what that actually looks like when you actually have one of these limits. So when you have your IPI limits, and every product should have these, essentially, so this is the SoStocked dashboard. So if you are using SoStocked, this was a recent addition as of 2 weeks ago. We are pulling the information from Amazon, and you can see there's a limit. This is the overall limit. This is how much inventory is currently in FBA. So this gives you your amount you're allowed to ship. And now I wanted to know, so we only have 463 units that we can ship. We have just under 2,000 units. However, if you come over here, you'll look at our total amount of inventory in Amazon is 151 units. And then there's 380 units in reserve. So there's about 500 units that is actually at Amazon. Yet we have over 2,000 available. So why are they saying that we can only send in 400? Well, what Amazon does is they count all of the stuff that is inbound. So this becomes very important. We're going to talk about what you can do, what you should strategically be doing if you know that this is how Amazon's algorithm works. Their restock algorithm is going to include everything that you have inbound to Amazon. Right? So what we are doing currently is we have an IPI limit calculation where we will tell you to send only what Amazon will allow you to send. Because what is happening is a lot of people are creating their shipments. They're going to create their shipments based on their projections or based on what they think they're going to need for the holidays, and they're not being allowed to. They're saying, I want to send in 1,000, and then Amazon spits back, no, you can only send 463. So it's kind of making things a little bit difficult. So we added this component where we're essentially telling you to send in the maximum amount that Amazon is allowing you to send rather than more than that amount. All right. All right, so that's the difference between max ship quantity and your restock limits. Now, you might wonder, if you don't have a software like SoStocked, you might wonder, where would you actually find this? So the place that you would find the report that tells you what your limits are and what your max ship quantity is under the reports. You're going to go to the fulfillment reports, and then it's your restock inventory report. So when you download that, it's going to give you a grid. You can download it as a file, and you're going to look for the limits, and then you're going to look for the max ship quantity, and there are 2 columns toward the end of the document. So if you are interested in finding out, you can also start to track it over time. There are ways to increase that limit over time, which we can talk about also. Okay, influencing factors. So these are the influencing factors. These are things that you should be working on as a business, because I don't know that this is going to get, this is probably never going to really change that much. It might get a little bit better after the holidays, but this is something that now Amazon is really focusing on. And Amazon has been doing more and more to tell us that they don't want us in their warehouse as a storage facility. So we need to be able to improve this score. Otherwise, we get into essentially a stock out loop, because Amazon has these rules set up. They're very slow at checking in inventory, and then as they're checking in inventory, you could stock out, and then because you're stocked out, your rates decrease. Your rates decrease because Amazon is not set up to calculate stock outs. A stock out will work against your IPI. They don't calculate the fact that you stocked out. They don't look at an adjusted velocity, right? And an adjusted velocity is very important to understand, because essentially what it is, it's taking all of your stock outs, it's removing all of the stock outs from your calculation, and it's actually giving you what you would have sold. It's your true velocity, what you would have sold if you hadn't stocked out. So Amazon has a very difficult time in doing that. I don't understand why. It's just the way that their algorithm has been set up. They should be able to. They have all the data that we have. We're taking all that data and we're finding a true adjusted velocity. They're not doing that. So that's something that you need to know, is stocking out is very bad for your restock limits. You have to start looking at the risk involved, and if you are going to stock out and you have a way to avoid a stock out, that's very important. And we'll talk about something else that you can do if you do stock out. How can you keep your limit up in a good range? All right. So here are the factors that influence inventory health, right? This is the inventory performance index. So you have stranded inventory, excess inventory, sell-through, and in-stock inventory. And you can find this in your inventory dashboard. So what do you do with this data? If you know that you've got some hits against you on some of these things, how do you improve this score? All right, so you have stranded inventory. So the easiest thing to do with stranded inventory is to basically unstrand it. Stranded inventory means that for some reason, your inventory has been delisted. It means that you have inventory sitting at FBA, but it's not tied to a live listing. So a couple of reasons why this could happen. One is that you could have a suspension and you simply need to fix the issues involved in that suspension. And then relist the product. The other thing could be that if you're, say, selling wholesale, the brand owner could decide that they don't want you to sell anymore, and they tell Amazon that they don't want you to sell anymore, and then your rights to selling that product are removed. At that point, you have no other choice than to really just pull that inventory. And there is a cost involved. On an annual basis, Amazon tends to, around September, tends to August or September, tends to allow you to remove any inventory without any fees. So they won't charge you any fees for a specific period of time. However, they're going to want to restrict you from sending that inventory in again for a certain period of time. All right, excess inventory. So excess inventory, this is the same thing that I was talking about, removing overstock, right? You've got a couple of things you can do with excess inventory. You can create a removal order, and currently you'll be paying a fee. At the time of this recording, I believe it's 50 cents per unit for removal. If you simply dispose of it, you don't want to have it sent back, you get it disposed, it's 30 cents per unit. So it ends up, costing you, but it could improve your overall IPI. The other thing that you can do is to set up a fulfillment center or a 3PL. So Amazon's policies with, if you have excess inventory, it might be because you're sending everything straight from your manufacturer into Amazon, and then you're just selling through. And if you have a high minimum order quantity, that gets you into potentially, if you have a high MOQ and a low velocity, it gets you into sending in more inventory than you actually should. So setting up a warehouse that can drip that inventory in, drip your replenishments in, would be a way to better control your excess inventory. Amazon is really pushing for this. This is why they have this as one of the markers. There's a couple of different markers that are kind of encouraging us to set up our warehouse or fulfillment center, right? Or warehouse. So it's really, I think it's an important thing. It's everything that Amazon's doing is pointing to them wanting us to get out of their warehouses. So looking into 3PLs would be valuable. And again, I have a list of third-party warehouses that, if you stay to the end, I will be emailing out to everyone who stayed on the webinar. Okay, so having good data is important, right? So if you are over ordering or under ordering, it's going to affect your IPI because you're either you have excess inventory or you're running out of stock. And that's when getting really good, smart data becomes important. So some of the things, and anything that I talk about, I'm showing in SoStocked. If you're using some other system or you're using Excel, these are things that you could just really think with, how can I implement that into my current system, right? So if you have excess inventory, it might be because you over ordered. For example, Christmas, during Christmas, you had a huge sales spike because some influencer mentioned you on a morning, Christmas gifting segment of the news. True story, happened to us. If you're just looking at your sales from last year and you don't factor that stuff out, you can get into some real trouble. You can over order by that amount, right? So if you sold 2,000 units additional in that time period, then you could be overstocked by an additional 2,000 units. So you need to be able to isolate your sales spikes and remove them from the calculation so that you're not continually over ordering. For example, October, we're not used to October having Prime Day in it. So if next year October comes around and we just simply look at our sales for October and we don't get granular with the data and remove those additional, I guess, outliers, then we can get into some, restocking issues by over ordering, or as we mentioned before with stockouts, under ordering. If you're out of stock for 10 out of the 30 days, then you are gonna order a lower amount than you normally should order, unless you kind of keep track of these things and keep this documented and use a system more in line with adjusted velocity. Because I have had people talk to me about, oh, well, why does it say that I had 10 units a day? I didn't sell 300 units of that product. I sold, 250 units. And then it come to find out, looking at the system, we can open up sales spikes feature and find that in that same period of time, there was a stock out. Actually, looking at the stock out feature, there was a stock out, and that's why. And so using adjusted velocity is a lot more precise. So having good data is very important, right? So we talked about velocities, we talked about sales spikes. And so the next thing that you should consider looking into is a min-max restocking system. So min-max restocking sets a pattern. It establishes what is called a buffer or a safety stock, and it maximizes the amount that you'll ever hold. So you have these two ranges. You've got the minimum or safety, and you've got the maximum, so that you can control the amount. You're not sending in excess inventory, right? So it simplifies orders and transfers significantly by always staying in that range. So the way that works is that you'll want to establish the amount of inventory that you're going to be keeping on hand at all times, right? And the longer the lead time, the more things can go wrong. So if you're sending inventory in directly from China, there's a lot more things that can go wrong than if you're sending it right up the street from your third-party warehouse. So you'll want to make sure that you are adjusting your buffer stock to account for the amount of things that could go wrong, the amount of delays that could occur. I would recommend using your setting your minimums and your maximums in days if you can. This is best because then it will fluctuate based on your adjusted velocity. So if we had 30 days worth of buffer stock and 90 days worth of our max stock, it's going to keep us within that range. It's going to tell us to ship in 90 days worth of stock. We're going to sell through, and then we're going to be notified to send inventory in so that by the time we hit our buffer stock, our inventory is arriving and it gets us back up to that 90 days. So this is a min-max restocking. This is something that big warehouses tend to use when they need to order big things like, printing companies. They order big reams, huge, thousands of pounds of paper, thousands of pounds of ink. They have measuring systems that have a minimum and a maximum that automatically trigger a response when they hit their minimum to stock back up to their maximum. And so this is a very sophisticated thing that is being used in big warehouses. So this is something that you can kind of set is minimums and maximums very, very, very well. And then using the in days will mean that it's fluctuating based on your season. So if you've got buffer stock during your high season is going to be a lot higher than buffer stock during your low season. So setting in days means that it's fluctuating based on that. And so you don't have to go in and continually edit it, because if you are using units, 300 units on your low season might be just fine, but 300 units on your high season might be, maybe a handful of days and is not going to cut it. And then of course, you can override using the IPI limits. You can override your max stock with whatever Amazon will allow. Min-max stocks is also, I like to call it the paint by numbers setting. It's also great when you're working with VAs, when you're trying to pass certain things over to your VAs, because it's very easy. It's kind of push button, and you don't have to wait for, you don't have to kind of eyeball things and kind of make things work in your head as the brand owner. You can say, when it gets to this, reorder. When it gets, and when you reorder, you put it to the 90 days. One note in terms of best practices for buffer stock, one thing to note is that Amazon needs to have enough product to properly distribute. So you might think that 10 days of buffer stock is enough, but you have to realize that Amazon spreads your inventory all over the country, or all over, the continent in the case of Europe. So there are a couple of things that are happening. Some people get a 1-day Prime badge. For specific products, Amazon will do a 1-day Prime. A lot in the grocery category, for example. A 1-day Prime shipping where they will ship it in 1 day and they will give a badge or give that classification to that product 1-day Prime. Now you can lose that if you don't have enough inventory dispersed throughout the country. The other thing that happens that you don't really realize in the background is that Amazon may not show your ad if you don't have inventory in that territory. So if you don't have inventory in the Midwest, someone in the Midwest may not see your ad, or the ranking might not be as high in that period of time, because Amazon doesn't want to, they have to account for the 2-day shipping. So they're going to favor someone else's listing, and you won't really know why it's happening. So keeping your inventory buffer stock at a decent level, say maybe 30 days, as opposed to 10 days, will help you to prevent that. And it's something that it's happening in the background. You can't really see or notice that it's necessarily happening, but it definitely can affect things. So don't put your buffer stock too low. All right, we talked about minimum and maximums. Okay, and sell-through rate. Okay, sell-through rate. So a couple of things. So sell-through rate is how fast is your inventory turning over? How often is it? When you send your inventory in, how soon before you have to restock your inventory? Amazon likes to see a good sell-through rate. It doesn't help you and it doesn't help Amazon for your inventory to sit there for long term, right? Sit there for 6 months not selling. For one, Amazon's space is taken up. For two, you've got storage fees that are accumulating. And for three, you're tying up a lot of extra capital that you could be putting into more successful, higher velocity products. So increasing your sell-through rate, you can do things by increasing your conversion rate or by running, PPC ads, running sales. So anything that you can do to increase your sales velocity and beyond just the using a third-party warehouse and sending in less than you normally did, that's going to help with the increasing of the sell-through rate. So as part of your inventory planning, you should go through your slow-moving products and try to see if you can come up with ways to increase your sell-through rate on those products. All right, so here's another thing. I mentioned how you can get your limits increased, right? Getting your limits increased before the holidays, because you may be looking at your limits if you have seen your limits, right, your restock limits, and noticing that you're probably going to have a problem, especially how Amazon has been taking such a long time to check things in. You might have an issue with running out of stock. So when you increase your sell-through, when you increase your sales, your limits are going to go up. So if you did well on Prime Day, that's likely will have helped your IPI limits or your restock limits. So I think that, and I don't know if Amazon intended that for that purpose, but it will help going into the holiday season if you can, if you can ride that wave, have that limit increase, but then develop a plan to ramp up sales before the holidays to further increase your limit. So that's what I would be doing right now. If you're nervous about the amount of storage you're able to use or the amount of inventory you're able to sell, I would start seeing how you could potentially run sales or increase or ramp up your sales going into Christmas so that you can increase that limit. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, that was a recent thing that we learned. We had talked about it and wondered about it, and we did a little bit of a survey to find out what happens if you go out of stock, right? So there's a couple of things that happen when you go out of stock. When you go out of stock, Amazon is not going to, they're not looking at the adjusted velocity, right? They're not looking at, the number of sales days. They're looking at the total number of days. So they'll look at, say, maybe, like 30 days. What are your 30 days worth of sales, right? And what's that total amount? And they're going to say that you can send in based on that total amount. So if you were stocked out for 10 of those days, you have 10 days less of inventory that you can potentially send in. They're going to give you a much smaller limit than if you had been selling through that whole period of time. So that gets you into some hot water in terms of your IPI limits. Now, how do you actually combat that? I mean, the first thing would be obviously, try not to run out of stock. So if you can avoid a stock out, you definitely should try to do that. It can get to be a little bit difficult because Amazon takes so long to send things in. So I would say increasing your transfer time would be important, right? Making sure that you are sending in sooner rather than later. However, Amazon is going to assess the amount that you're allowed to send based on today's date. So even if it takes you longer, you might want to, you might have to, you might have a less amount of an amount that you can send. So by the time that it actually reaches its destination, it'll free up some more and you can send more. So you'll be consistently sending inventory and your transfer amounts are going to increase. But the thing that you can do to, if you are going to run out of stock, is actually to switch to FBM. So my advice to people, if you can afford it, is to switch to FBM and sell FBM, because one of the things that's been found is that FBM, continuing to fulfill by FBM is going to help you to maintain your limits. It's going to help you. That's one thing that Amazon seems to be getting right, is that they are allowing you to keep your limits up if you can keep the sales up, even if you go through FBM. So that's something too. If your profit margin is decreased, right, it gets a little bit difficult if you would lose money. I would start looking into, I would start really looking into, can you actually afford it? Are you going to lose money? And what is the benefit of stocking out versus, or what is the risk of stocking out versus the risk of losing money on units while you're waiting for your inventory to check in. So those are two things to think about. If you will make a profit, but your profit will be decreased, it is likely a lot more costly to run out of stock and have to re-rank than it would be to sell, fulfilled by merchant for, say, maybe a week. It's just little tips to kind of think of. And again, we have a list of fulfillment centers that we can provide, because fulfillment centers, a lot of them are getting filled up. A lot of the storage facilities are getting filled up. So it's important to be able to get onto this immediately if you haven't gotten this set up, so that you can get in there, as these guys are being just overloaded with people who are having to pivot their business due to these Amazon changes. And again, stop sending in too much inventory. Get your warehouse set up a min-max restocking system, and help you to essentially improve your systems and make Amazon happier. All right, talked about those. In-stock inventory. So in-stock inventory is another thing that Amazon looks at, and they calculated, it's funny because they calculate this in-stock inventory, but I don't think that this really, like I said, they say on their website that they're actually using this data, and they're actually looking at your in-stock versus out of stock, but they're not applying that when they're creating your limits. So they say the in-stock rate, they look at the percentage of time that you are actually in stock over the past 60 days. And then they're going to look at, what that percentage is. So for one SKU, it might be, for this example, 50%. The other SKU, it might be 100%. And then they're going to look at the velocity for each of those. And so they're going to take the velocity of each product multiplied by its in-stock rate, or its in-stock percentage, and they're going to add those together and then divide them by your total velocity to achieve what your actual full in-stock rate was. So in this scenario, the in-stock rate was 80%. So that's something to keep in mind, because some people are saying, well, what if I delete a product? What if I delete a product? Will that be okay? Well, if you sold that product in the last 60 days, if your in-stock rate for that product was higher, than the other, for example, if we deleted SKU number 2, which has 100% in-stock rate, then we would go down to 50% in-stock rate rather than 80%. So just bear in mind that deleting SKUs could help you, because if we deleted the SKU number 1 at 50%, we'll be at 100% in-stock rate. Just be aware that deleting a SKU may or may not help you, and you want to make sure that you look at the math involved in that. So what can we expect of quantity limits? So you'll generally be allowed the 3 months worth of inventory. So Amazon's going to look at your inventory over time. They're going to look at that 30 days. They're going to look at how much your sales were, and then they're going to essentially, multiply it by 3 months. Now that's not exactly a hard, fast rule, but that's, what the general gist of their calculation is. Now, however, if you have a low sales volume, or if you have no sales history, it's going to be a limit of 200 units. So it won't go below 200 units. We haven't seen anything go below 200 units, but you'll have a limit of 200 units, which makes it challenging in terms of actually launching products. But in terms of when we talked about ramping things up, if you do ramp that product up, you can very quickly get into a higher range. So there was a study done by Helium 10 where they took a product and they launched it with 200 units as the limit. And in about 18 days, they more than doubled the amount of units they were able to send in. So do know that doing launches or doing sales surges is going to help your limits. And then unfortunately, there is another factor. There's a hidden factor that is not talked about, and that hidden factor is actually oversized products. In a mastermind group that I am in, there was a study done with 82 sellers looking at their IPI scores, and the common denominator for low IPI scores beyond any of what we've just talked about were oversized products. So if you have oversized products and your score is low, that is something to realize. That Amazon does not talk about that as being part of one of the factors, but it definitely is, and it's potentially the strongest factor, unfortunately. And there's nothing you can really do about it, right? So we're also seeing space limits. So your limit per SKU might be high, but your space limit might be low. So the thing to prioritize is your high selling products. Make sure that you keep your space for your high selling products rather than your low selling products. Don't put a bunch of low selling products in low velocity products into Amazon, because everyone has space limits, and if you have larger products, you're going to eat up those space limits pretty quickly. Okay, so this is just a reminder again that FBA shipments count towards your FBA stock, right? So that means that you need to be smart about your FBA shipments. If you're used to pre-labeling inventory in China before shipping, and it takes 30 to 45 days to arrive, it's going to eat up a lot of your space. And if you have inventory in China and that is shipping from China, and you have inventory in your warehouse that then is blocked because of the inventory in China being shipped, that becomes a problem. This is actually something that one of the SoStock users, I had a conversation with with a user about this very problem. They had Chinese inventory that had already been pre-labeled, and it was being sent to Amazon, and then they were blocked. They couldn't send anything in, but they had warehouse inventory. So if your process is to stop at your warehouse beforehand, the best thing that you can do is, if you go from China and you're going to your warehouse, is just to swap out those labels. Once your inventory, send out those inventory, print the shipping labels all over again, send in the shipping labels for your local warehouse. When your shipments arrives from China, swap those labels out, and then send them on with the new labels when you're able to. So kind of keep that in mind. That's something that you can do to get around that. And for goodness sakes, stop stocking out. Amazon has kind of sucker punched all of us with, creating stockouts due to their COVID restrictions, and then setting up these guidelines that kind of then hurt us again by being affected by those COVID stockouts. And so it's time to start adopting these firm practices, right? Adopting things like looking for stockouts, looking for sales spikes, looking at your adjusted velocity, and setting up things like min-max restocking, or at the very least setting up a buffer stock, making sure that you have a buffer stock so you have a plan to order and send in earlier than needed. All right, and then knowing your IPI transfers, knowing what those numbers are, how to find those numbers. The last thing that I'll add is marketing syncing. So one of the biggest reasons that people run out of stock is actually they tend to market in a vacuum. We're very marketing heavy as a community, which is great, but we tend to leave inventory as an afterthought until it's causing us problems. So one of the things that we did here is, and I advise this for, no matter what system you're using, this is a game changer. It's called the inventory timeline. It'll help you to plan things out. It'll help you to see what's happening with your inventory over time, what orders are arriving at what point, and then when do you have sales. So for example, you can set up your lightning deals, right? If you have a lightning deal for Black Friday, you can plug it in there. And so you're just putting these things into your inventory timeline so you can visualize what is going to happen with your inventory. Seasonal sales spikes as well, building out seasonal sales spikes, having them show up here and indicate what your potential needs are. Because one of the things that happens is I've heard stories of PPC ad agencies stocking out their clients because they didn't test out whether the inventory could support something like 20% additional sales growth, right? I've also seen email campaigns that have gone out offering 20% off for Mother's Day, and then by Father's Day the seller was stocking out. Well, if you had really built out your game plan and put your marketing into your inventory timeline, you would be able to see that you couldn't afford 20%, but maybe you could afford 15% growth. So you would let your marketing company know that they need to adjust the strategy for now, and by the next order you could increase it to 20%, right? Or you can't afford 20% off coupons, so don't have a Mother's Day sale, right? And place an order, and then down the road you can look at planning them out a little bit better, planning out your Valentine's Day, planning out your Mother's Day, and just using these tools to kind of build that in. So, no matter what you're using, an inventory timeline is very helpful to be able to kind of lay these things out to figure out what your sales actually are, so that you avoid stocking out by, basically a really good marketing strategy that does really well, but then stocks you out and it becomes a very bad marketing strategy. All right, so have a backup plan. So I like to say, even if your Amazon is your only sales channel, it should not be your only distribution channel, right? It should not be the only way that you're able to get inventory to your customers. So that was a problem that I had when I shipped all of my inventory to Amazon and they lost it, right? Amazon was my only distribution channel. I sent all of my inventory and basically couldn't sell that product all Christmas. So that's one of the things to think about. Don't send all of your inventory to Amazon at once, because if it does get lost, then you can get into some issues where you can't sell your product. And also, if Amazon is not checking your stuff in, you should have a way to turn on Fulfilled by Merchant and start making those sales while you wait for Amazon to get its act together. So like I said, don't let it be your only distribution channel. So you create up a backup distribution channel that's in the form of a fulfillment center. I did a video on fulfillment centers and warehouses. It's on, if you go to So Stocked, search So Stocked, one word, on our YouTube channel, or on YouTube, you can find our channel and you'll find the webinar that I did about warehouses and fulfillment centers, how not to get screwed. So I talk a lot about, fees, the types of fees to ask for, the types of tricks they try to pull with fees. I've experienced them personally, so I am familiar with them. And then I also talk about the fact that the Amazon, they're so overwhelmed at sometimes that if a company is doing both fulfillment and replenishment meaning they're sending cartons into Amazon and they're fulfilling individual orders, sometimes the fulfillment can get so backed up that they pull everyone off of the replenishment and your inventory just sits there, and it lengthens out the time that you're actually that it actually takes to send your inventory into Amazon, on top of Amazon's delays. So having these smart conversations with these people that you're working with, making sure that they can stand the capacity increase, especially during the holidays. All right, so any inventory management solution should really be, factoring in several different things. You've got removing sales spikes, you've got removing stockouts, factoring in your lightning deals, projecting seasonality, tracking your orders and transfers, which we didn't even get into much of that, but we do have a tool for tracking your orders and transfers, getting reorder alerts, and then managing your FBA, 3PL, and your on order shipments. So being able to look at every aspect of your inventory. There are a lot of systems out there that only focus on, you know, the FBA side and don't track the shipments or the transfers that need to go from your 3PL. So just, you know, pay attention to all of these different factors. And let me know if you guys have any questions. You can go ahead and type them in the chat or in the Q&A. If you don't, that's fine. I know it can kind of be like drinking from a fire hose, but hopefully this was helpful. Again, So Stocked is the solution that I came up with in order to solve a lot of these problems. We're very much in communication and talk a lot with the sellers. I talk with sellers on a pretty much daily basis, and we get a lot of ideas, a lot of great development ideas from the sellers in terms of forecasting, order tracking, PO creation, so you can create your POs directly from the software, and inventory management in general. So we've got a couple of people who have shared some of their feedback on what they were able to benefit from with So Stocked, such as getting rid of the amount of time that it takes using Excel, because we plug right into your Amazon API, the Amazon account. And other people have had, you know, the ability to cut down on their expenses, the air shipments, due to setting up these systems, due to setting up things like buffer stocks, and getting real-time visibility. That's a big one. A big problem that people have is that they have to download the sheets. They have to basically start from scratch and rebuild everything, plug in the numbers every single time. So that saves a lot of time for people. So if you're finding that you're stocking out because you're just putting that task off, which is very common, having an automated system really could be a game changer. And then we also had someone with the beta tool said, I can't say enough good things about it. It's a must-have. This was someone who was building the system to sell. He had a business and he was looking to sell it, and so he was putting systems in place to make his business more valuable. So that was one of the things that he did to help to increase the valuation was, look, I have this inventory system, I have this inventory tool in place, and it added a lot of value to the buyer knowing that that is in place. We have some questions. I'm going to go back to these questions here. Let's see. Why is it not opening those ones? All right, here we go. Great webinar. Do you have any plans to incorporate other sales channels like Shopify? Yes, we definitely have plans to incorporate Shopify. Shopify will be the first one that we intend. Our target is end of the year. Now things do come up in software, so you know sometimes you think something's going to be really fast and it takes a lot longer. So sometimes that can get pushed out a little bit, but what we're shooting for is by the end of the year for Shopify integration, then get into Walmart and other integrations after that. Then I have another question. Most of our inventory comes from a master box carton. Does it really need pallets for storage in 3PL, or can we ask for storage without pallets as well? Yeah, you can ask for storage without pallets. What they'll probably do is they'll probably put them on a pallet and they'll charge you per pallet. So if they can fit all your products into one pallet, they will. I would personally ask, make sure that they might want to charge you per SKU on each pallet. So they might want to divide that and not do a mixed pallet. Ask about that, because if you've got a couple of boxes on one pallet for one SKU and a couple of boxes for one pallet on one SKU and another SKU, they might be charging you for both of those, so that you're being charged to have 4 boxes on a pallet. You're being charged for a full pallet here and on this other side, whereas they could have just combined it and they're basically overcharging you. These are things that I have seen. I've personally experienced these things. Asking those questions, kind of digging in, you know, it really becomes eye-opening how some companies can kind of, you know, game the system when you don't know what you don't understand. You just pay the bills. I moved away, or I'm moving. I have some, some inventory left over, but we have moved away from companies like that into companies that I have personal relationships. I know these guys, and the people that we are with now are Hanu. They just expanded, and they will be on the list that I send you of the fulfillment centers. They have a fulfillment center and they have a warehouse. They've split it to one side for each, and they have different crews for each. So those are kind of some of the things to keep in mind. But yeah, I would, when you reach out to 3PLs, just ask them, can you use do mixed pallets? Can you do mixed pallets and only charge me for mixed pallets and not put a single SKU on each pallet? That's what I would advise. Okay, let's see. All right. Any more questions? Doesn't look like it. Okay, so just kind of finally, wanted to just kind of let you know, if you haven't tried So Stocked, we're currently offering it at a lifetime price of $59 per month for life. Doesn't matter how many SKUs you have, doesn't matter how many orders you have. We are charging a flat rate for life for as long as you have your account. And we're doing that because we are very interested in getting feedback. We've been around for a little over a year now, and we're calling it our advanced beta. And with our new update, when we added the IPI limits feature, my business partners have been kind of pushing me to raise the price. So we will likely be raising the price soon. I think there's one or two things we're waiting on, and then we'll be raising the price pretty soon. So if you're interested in getting involved, grabbing that $59 a month price, timing is perfect right now. When we started our first 25, our first 25 beta testers started out paying $37. So we're kind of gradually raising the price as we add more features. Eventually, we'll have a tiered structure where you will have to pay based on the size of your brand. So you can go to sostock.com and get more information about that. I am also will send out a link with this the replay. All right, have a couple more questions. Let's see. Any plans to develop an API? Yes, we do plan to have an open API. That'll probably be part of the integrations project, to have an open API so you can do things like connect with Zapier, export to Google Sheets, tie into any other softwares that you have, and all of that. Yeah, to enable connectivity with 3PLs that also have an API. Yes, definitely. And then some of these other larger companies such as Deliver, we early on in our development talked to the CEO of Deliver to be able to tie in with Deliver's API is definitely a goal, and then tying into, say, a ShipStation would be another goal, because a lot of warehouses are using ShipStation to be able to connect, say, their Shopify sales to their warehouse. So a lot of the data should be able to be pulled from ShipStation app. All right, good questions. Okay, fantastic. So if you guys don't have any other questions, you guys can reach me at chelsea@sostocked.com for any other questions. And check out the software if you haven't already, and just definitely just get a plan, figure out a plan to put in place to be able to make sure that you keep in stock as much as possible, even if it's FBM sales. Will definitely help to make your fourth quarter a much more successful. All right, one more question. How do fulfillment centers integrate with Seller Central? What do you think about ShipStation? Yeah, so I definitely think ShipStation is that's one of the ways that personally we've done before, is with our fulfillment center, is to use ShipStation as the connector between Shopify and our fulfillment center. You just have to ask if there are other apps that are being used, and as we start to branch out and integrate, we'll do surveys to find out what everyone is using, so that we can then tap into those APIs. But ShipStation, I believe my husband set that up, so I believe there was a little bit, he had to go a little bit back and forth on the phone with them. That was some years ago, to get it right, but we used it just fine. There was no real issues with it, so we definitely plan on integrating with ShipStation. All right, and John says, thank you. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming. If you have any other questions, like I said, I'm happy to answer. Reach out, and hopefully hope your fourth quarter is extremely successful, and hope to see you in the next one. Last thing, I do have recurring webinars. I will have another one of these in another couple of weeks, and if you have any requests for specific subject matter, let me know, and I can go ahead and we can find the experts to be able to help us with that. All right, thanks so much for coming, guys, and check your email. We'll have the list of the warehouses and fulfillment centers for you. All right, see you later. Bye, guys.